On a starry night, you see beautiful spheres of light flashing across the horizon, defying all earthly logic. You're not alone, since many have witnessed this very same experience. The question, however, is, are we alone?
UFOs had been visiting the planet Earth before recorded history. And this goes clear back beyond even the Old Testament, which is dated by Archbishop Usher as 4000 BC.
The modern UFO phenomenon, or should I say the modern UFO wave, began in February of 1942 with an incident called the Battle of Los Angeles, in which a UFO actually parked itself over the city of Culver City for a period of several hours, and a photograph of this object actually appeared on the front page of the Los Angeles Times and the Wall Street Journal at that time. And then, of course, the later incidences began to occur with the crash of what we believe to be extraterrestrial saucers outside of Roswell, New Mexico, and then the famous sighting of Kenneth Arnold over Mount Rainier, who coined the term flying saucers, which is where we get the term flying saucers today.
UFO sightings have taken place over major cities and in full view of many, many people. For instance, the one that was taken over San Francisco, California. We have pictures of UFOs that were taken in formation, if you please, over Washington, D.C. And then there were some over Baltimore. There were some over Miami, Florida. Some over Chicago. Some over New York City, seen by many, many people. Only these particular sightings, for some reason, did not make the front pages.
Since the sightings in Mexico City began, we have actually had more mass sightings by more people. A pair of rather large flying saucers actually parked themselves over Mexico City, were videotaped from hundreds of different locations, and were witnessed by close to 27 million people. Gulf Breeze, Florida is particularly hot right now. Fife, Alabama. There are areas in Wisconsin which are very, very rife with activity. Just recently in the media, there have been places in Michigan, along the lakes there, along Lake Michigan, on the eastern shore of Lake Michigan, in which there's been a mass amount of activity. For many years, there was activity at a place called Area 51, which I personally had blown the lid off of and investigated, and I believe a lot of that was military activity, and I believe it was moved in the early part of 1994.
One of the hot spots on the desert as far as UFO communication and landings and sightings are concerned seemed to be the high desert area in Giant Rock right near Yucca Valley. That seems to be a place where people congregate by the hundreds, and they do see some strange things out there. Another place is on the edge, which is called the mailbox area of Area 51, not too far from Las Vegas, Nevada. You will see things in the sky that defy human imagination.
By about 1986, 87 or so, there started to be some very unusual things that were spotted around that area, which led us as researchers to begin to investigate this wave of UFO activity. And it got to the point of where I could take a group of people out there, and we would camp out by the fence just on the other side of the border of Area 51 and basically see flying saucers, flying virtually on a timetable basis every Wednesday night from about 6 p.m., 6:30 p.m., or whenever the sun would set until about 9:30 or so, and then starting up again about 4:45 a.m. Thursday morning the next morning.
In the files of the National Investigations Committee, we have quite a few reports on the famous Roswell, New Mexico sighting. Now, it appears that though this was perhaps one of the most widely acclaimed evidences of a UFO governmental secrecy and cover-up, the facts pertaining to that particular sighting are so uncanny because you had witness after witness after witness after witness attesting to one particular story, and the Air Force investigators and the press following the Air Force investigators more so than the individual witnesses concocted a story that it was nothing but a collapsed weather balloon. Following the rules of evidence, there is no doubt in my mind, nor in the minds of any individual with an ounce of brain who reads the report exactly as it happened, as opposed to the report of the cover-up. There was a crashed UFO on the outskirts of Roswell, New Mexico.
what exactly constitutes proof? I mean, nothing counts. Photographs, they claim, can now be faked. And of course, we're talking about photographs that date all the way back to the 1940s or so. And they say, so photographic evidence can be easily faked, so that doesn't count. Eyewitness testimony doesn't count, even though the eyewitness testimony comes from presidents, popes, prime ministers, generals, police officers, individual that we trust with our very lives, firemen, et cetera, but their testimony doesn't count. Videotape doesn't count, simply because, you know, it is supposedly that too can be faked. Film doesn't count. Top secret government documents don't count because they can all be forged. So my challenge to them is, what exactly counts as proof? If you wanted to prove the existence of UFOs in a court of law, it could be done relatively simply. But the fact is that you have the various UFO debunkers who would much rather attack the reputations of the people who saw something rather than actually dealing with the evidence.
You can go out to the desert or out to any place that's completely void of the bright lights of any given city, and you choose yourself a certain frame within that framework and look at the sky and keep watching the sky. You will invariably see strange lights. By strange, I mean multicolored lights, and they'll move sometimes in a zigzag formation, sometimes in a straight line, and they're not stars, and they're not satellites, because satellites have an established pattern, and so do stars, unless they're falling stars. But usually out in the desert area, you can choose and watch, and something up there out of the ordinary will occur.
A shimmering light in the cornfield of a small Indiana farm has caused a stir among residents for decades. The players are a farmer, his son, and a murderer. The setting, a mysterious light that glows when beckoned. Documented home video footage sets the stage for this ghostly tale.
Rensselaer, Indiana, a small farming community just 80 miles south of Chicago, known for its vast landscape and humble tranquility. It is also the site of one of the greatest unexplained mysteries of the century. Legend has it that Farmer Moody was chasing after his son's abductor in the darkness, guided solely by the light of his lantern from his tractor. After a gallant chase, the man escaped, leaving Moody's dead son behind. Out of despair, Moody hung himself.
And he happened to hang himself right here on this particular tree. It's now a tree stump.
3 flicks of your car lights is said to summon the spirit of Moody and his bright lantern light. Witness Bob Lemire recalls his own experience.
And I've seen the light myself coming out here. I've seen it. We've came out here and we flashed our lights like the legend says to, and we've seen the light come up down the road, get bright, and then seem to taper off as we went down the road.
Lemire's startling home video footage documents his sightings. As he and his friend John approached the stump, they flicked their lights 3 times. Witnesses claim the light can even appear at will, as it did here. The 2 lights on the right are known objects, while the one on the left appears much closer. After a few minutes, they notice something strange. The light vanishes. A few moments later, it reappears much brighter. After hearing Lemire's story, we decided to investigate. The first step was to call Moody with our car lights.
So go ahead, flick it 3 times. Now let's look in the distance and see if anything happens.
Unfortunately, nothing was seen after several minutes. We tried again. Then it happened. A light from the cornfield appeared in the darkness. You can see it in the upper left-hand corner of your screen as our cameraman tried to zero in on it. We have circled it for easier identification. The light appears to be in the sky, but I assure you this is ground level. As you saw, we went from total blackness to the sudden appearance of this strange light. It was time to get a closer view of our findings.
What we've got here that could be one logical explanation is this particular stop sign right here. This thing here gave sort of a reddish glow from about 1.25 miles down.
These other signs at the end of the road could have reflected light as well, but I was wondering where the source of a known light could have been. There was nothing out here.
I mean, this is absolutely endless. There's absolutely nothing out here whatsoever besides this.
Upon returning to the tree stump, we were amazed at the amount of spectators gathered to see Moody's light. Among them was another witness with an even closer encounter.
This gentleman, Doug, over here, just told me a story that he was here last night. What did you see last night?
right up by the side of the road, there was a little body with a lantern just walking around, looking on the side of the road. You could see the whole outline of the body. It was bright yellow, and so was the lantern.
Really? Whatever skeptics may say, we were there and we saw this light appear from an origin not one of us could trace. The glow of Moody's light will continue to be one of our greatest mysteries.
Hello, I'm Patrick Macnee. For those who studied the phenomenon of UFOs, the question isn't whether they exist or not, it's how much the government knows about their existence. The answer? Probably a lot more than the government admits. In 1947, something crashed in a remote part of New Mexico. After a rancher brought pieces of the wreckage to the Roswell Army Air Base, an official press release stated that it was a flying saucer. Within hours, however, the story was changed. The public was told a mistake had been made, and the crashed object was nothing more than an ordinary weather balloon. Despite testimonies of scores of reliable witnesses who have since come forward, the official stand today, nearly 50 years later, is still that it was just a military weather balloon. A new Air Force investigation announced its findings just weeks before this broadcast.
It wasn't a UFO. That's what the Air Force is saying after an 8-month investigation of a crash near Roswell, New Mexico. A crash that occurred 47 years ago. For years, there have been stories passed along by the residents that what the Air Force called a weather balloon was really a UFO, and that there were extraterrestrials on board. The Air Force tracked down people, combed archives, and even sent some old news photos to the CIA for analysis. It concluded what other government agencies had concluded for many years. There was no conspiracy to hide the truth.
The amount of dissenting opinion is almost overwhelming among those who have investigated the incident and those who were witnesses. Don Schmidt, author of UFO Crash at Roswell, has painstakingly researched every angle of the Roswell story, including the notion that the Army misidentified a weather balloon as a UFO.
The first press release that it was a flying saucer, and 6 hours later, we're sorry, ladies and gentlemen, there's no threat. There's nothing to be up in arms about. It's just a radar reflector device, constructed of foil, balsa wood, and baling twine. Now, even the rancher would have recognized the baling twine, certainly, and the rest of the material very conventional. And the very idea that the rancher, the sheriff, the deputies, the intelligence officer, the base commander, the counterintelligence officers, the engineers at Roswell, nobody could identify foil sticks and baling twine until General Ramey examines the material, and it's just a weather balloon. The question is, which press release is the true story? We have over 500 witnesses testifying through sworn affidavit or video deposition that what was recovered out here at this site and at the debris field site just 40 miles from here was not manufactured on this earth.
Bob Shirkey is one of those witnesses. As an Army pilot stationed at Roswell, he got a close look at some of the recovered material as it was loaded onto a plane. He remembers the report that it was a flying saucer.
The very next day, there was a recant from 8th Air Force saying that it was a weather balloon that was found and not an unknown object. And all I can say to that is that we had weather balloons in base operations because the weather station was there also. And I would see them carry a balloon out, blow it up, and send it on its way with a radio sound and so forth. And what was brought through the hangar, through the building and loaded on the airplane was not the same material. It was not a weather balloon.
One important figure to express skepticism over the continuing balloon story is Congressman Stephen Schiff of New Mexico. His office has initiated its own investigation into the case. He believes official records pertaining to Roswell exist and that these should be made available to the public.
Can you imagine probably the best bomber group in the Army Air Corps saying that a weather balloon was a flying saucer. That would have been quite an embarrassment, and there should be some documentation of that going back and forth in Air Force, then Army Air Corps channels about how could this happen? You know, how could we make such fools out of ourselves if that is in fact what occurred? And I've asked the General Accounting Office to look for that documentation. I've also suggested they look at something else. There seems to be no doubt that these materials, when picked up, don't seem to have been treated like they were parts of a weather balloon. In other words, it seems to be uncontradicted that these materials were flown out of New Mexico under armed guard by military police. Now, weather balloons are not normally shipped under armed guard, so I've also suggested they look for the records as to who issued instructions suggesting that these materials be guarded at gunpoint. That is not how you'd normally see a weather balloon transported.
Public interest in the Roswell case has reached an all-time high as interest in UFOs in general is rising. Walter Haut was the public information officer at Roswell, whose job it was to issue the official flying saucer press release. Haut's Army experience with public information and UFOs has been called upon more recently. A couple of years ago, he and some partners opened a non-profit UFO museum in Roswell to satisfy a growing curiosity on the subject.
Radar and visual presentation from all 50 states.
Several months ago, the Showtime cable network aired a special 2-hour movie about Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer sent to investigate the crash. Here, the Major, played by Kyle MacLachlan, arrives at the debris-strewn ranch belonging to Mac Brazel, played by Dwight Yoakam.
You know those Japanese balloon bombs?
Yeah, made of rice paper, about 30 feet in diameter. They don't come apart when they land unless the bomb goes off. Then you'd see chart marks everywhere.
Right. Was this gouge here before? Nope. All right.
To understand the significance of the entire Roswell case, let's go back for a moment to early summer 1947. It was less than 2 years after the end of World War II. The troops had come home. America was getting back to work and coming to terms with its new position as a global power. And the Cold War was heating up. In late June and early July, there were a series of strange reports from all over the world. People were seeing unrecognizable objects flying around with inexplicable trajectories. Some appeared to be round discs, others cigar-shaped. And the stories were not just from ordinary citizens. Many reports came from highly trained pilots, both civilian and military. New Mexico at the time was home to a number of highly classified military projects. On the night of July the 4th, the central part of the state was hit by some of the most violent thunderstorms in memory. A rancher named Mac Brazel was one of a number of people who heard a loud explosion amidst the thunder. Investigators have established the sequence of events which then followed. July the 5th, Brazel discovers a huge field of very strange, lightweight metallic debris on his ranch, and the next day he brings it to the sheriff in Roswell. They then report the find to the Army Air Base. On July 7th, Brazel takes Major Jesse Marcel and another officer out to the debris field where they load up some of the material and bring it back to the base. The next morning, troops are sent out to guard the debris field as well as an actual crash site 40 miles away. After Brazel talks to some local radio stations, Colonel Blanchard, the commander of the base at Roswell, dictates a press release saying the Army has captured a flying disc. That afternoon, the story hits the wires, and phone lines in Roswell are jammed. But within hours, Major Marcel is sent to Fort Worth with some of the debris, and there, General George Ramey gives Marcel some remnants of a weather balloon. At a hastily arranged press conference, Ramey says his officers had made a mistake, and the crashed object was in fact nothing more than a weather balloon with an attached radar reflector. And so the case was closed. Everyone moved on to other things. Just 2 months later, the attention of the nation was riveted on Chuck Yeager as the man with the right stuff broke the sound barrier, and our own space program was officially underway. Whatever happened at Roswell was quickly forgotten by all, except those who were actually there. One of the most perplexing features of the incident is that the Army at first appeared to acknowledge the existence of an extraterrestrial craft, then completely denied it. Why didn't anyone question the about-face? Those who were there have their own theories.
This was right after the war. I say right after, it was a year and a half, but even so, everyone who'd been in the service during the actual war period had been always told, don't talk to anybody, don't tell them what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera.
I think you've got to take a couple things into consideration. The 509th was a very highly classified organization. They were the only ones in the world capable of handling and delivering an atomic weapon. If you didn't have a need to know, you didn't ask. I was a bombardier, amongst other duties. I never was permitted to go near an airplane that had the bomb racks capable of handling an atomic weapon. I never asked to. I knew that I wasn't supposed to, so that was the end of it. You've got a different frame of mind back in 1947 than you have in 1994.
Frank Joyce was a radio personality in Roswell at the time and spoke with rancher Mac Brazel. He believed national security may have motivated the cover-up.
That was a different era than now. You didn't have the complex society that we have now. You did not have TVs, cameramen, as we have scheduled here, a news reporter like yourself with a backing of all sorts of people and all the best equipment in the world to report everything that happened. So when a statement came out on the newswire that simply said it's a weather balloon, people were inclined to believe it. And I don't say these things lightly because I have great respect for our military and was at that time very, I would say, as much of a patriot as anyone. And as I said, given the mindset of people at that time, if you told me it was something of national security, I wouldn't talk about it.
Times were indeed different in 1947. This was before the era of Vietnam. The 60s and Watergate had not happened, nor the recent savings and loan scandals. It wasn't yet common practice to question everything the government did. It wasn't until 1978 that the file on Roswell was reopened. Stanton Friedman, a nuclear physicist, author, and popular lecturer, was the person who stumbled upon this extraordinary story.
In the course of my lecturing, of course, because I take such a strong stand, the lecture is flying saucers are real. I'm not an apologist, ufologist. A lot of people tell me lots of things. And once when I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, at a television station, waiting for a third interviewer, and the station manager's giving me coffee because the girl was late, out of the blue, no previous connection, anything we'd talked about. He says, you know, the guy you ought to talk to is Jesse Marcel. Who's he? Oh, well, he handled pieces in one of these saucers when he was in the military. That got my attention, as you can imagine. I said, well, is he alive? Do you know him? Oh, yeah, he lives over in Houma. I hadn't the faintest idea where Houma, Louisiana was then. I've been there since, of course. We're old ham radio buddies. Great guy. So
Friedman began to look into the case, and his findings led to a book, Crash at Corona. Others followed his lead, and one by one, witnesses who had kept silent for over 30 years began coming forward. Most people connected with Roswell took their cue from the Army and quietly accepted the weather balloon story, including the press.
They staged a launch of a radar reflector from a weather balloon and loudly proclaimed, fantasy of flying disc is explained here. All these pictures deal with this silly little radar reflector on a weather balloon. General Ramey gives the explanation. Next day they stage the launch. The media are there. It goes out on the wire. And that was the end of the flying saucer craziness.
Those who asked questions were told quite directly, don't.
The first release, all that material was taken out. Some of it, I understand, got into papers in other parts of the country off the original release. But I spent about 15 or 20 years not knowing whether that was true or not, because this story was really hushed up. I mean, it was shut up entirely.
Judd Roberts managed the radio station in Roswell where Frank Joyce worked. He recalls that dropping the entire story wasn't a request, it was an order.
I had a call from Washington the next day, right after that, after the news deal had come out, and saying that if we put anything on the air at all, that they were monitoring us, and if there was anything on the air at all, frankly, they'd pull our license. He wasn't talking about a hearing or anything. He said it'll be canceled not later than tomorrow morning.
There are many reports of witnesses being threatened or bullied, or in the case of military personnel, being shipped off to remote locations, all to keep the lid on this story.
Nobody knew about this site except some of the civilians involved, and they were actually threatened into submission. The military went to their homes, they sequestered them at the base and reinforced their oaths of secrecy with physical threats. In other words, you will come to bodily harm if you ever say a word about this.
When people like Stanton Friedman, Don Schmidt, and others went to federal agencies and began probing, one thing they found was that the U.S. government was anything but cooperative with information.
Back in the late 70s, went after the CIA, everybody's favorite target, you know. We want all your UFO information. We don't have any UFO information. You do too. We do not. We appeal. They deny. We go to court. The judge says, do a search of your files, gentlemen, at the CIA. They come back, oh, we found 900 pages of UFO information. After saying they had none, you understand. I naturally filed with the CIA for their 23 UFO documents. They're supposed to respond in 10 working days. That's pretty quick, and you know what's going on. 35 months later, they responded. They agreed to release the first 9. I was ecstatic until I looked at them. We're talking 23 documents, 9's pretty good. They were press abstracts of Eastern European newspaper articles about flying saucers, which the Russians had the day they were published. Their own 14 documents they withheld. They tried to discourage me from appealing. I appealed. 2 years after that, so it took me 5 years, they agreed to release tiny portions of 3 of those documents. This is a released CIA UFO document. Very informative. There are about 8 words or so that you can read there, none of which tell you anything.
Though official information is tough to come by, investigators press onward, inspired perhaps by increasing public curiosity. As time goes by, public interest seems to be anything but diminishing. In fact, it's just the opposite. There appears to be a growing desire by citizens to get whatever information the government has on Roswell. The popular scientific monthly, Omni magazine, recently featured a Roswell declaration in which readers were invited to join the petition for any information the government may have. There is an ever-growing pile of books, articles, and videos relating to Roswell. It's clear that people want to know.
So the question is, why are they still withholding all this information? Why the cover-up after all these years?
If you had some sort of a national security situation, people just wouldn't talk about it.
I can't imagine any kind of security need from the year of 1947, which may have been valid then, being still valid almost 50 years later.
After dark, the streets of Chicago teem with a different kind of nightlife. If a shadowy image sends an icy chill down your spine, is it real or imagined? James Romanovich investigates unexplained phenomena of Chicago.
Today we're going to take a look at a different side of Chicago, its sordid history, that which is filled with cemeteries, murders, and ghosts. People claim to see and feel ghosts. But ghost hunters are becoming much more scientific about the spirit world. And president of the Ghost Research Society, Dale Kaczmarek, shows us how.
These devices will pick up that disturbance, and then we can try other equipment like our cameras and tape recorders and so forth. Basically what this does is it picks up static electricity discharges in a given location. Another DOS meter, which doesn't give an audible signal, but actually gives LED lights. We have a Geiger counter out here.
One photo taken by Dale at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery shows this translucent apparition of a woman sitting on a tombstone.
We're here today to find out why so many people around the Chicagoland area travel to this particular cemetery in search of ghosts.
If you look at the historical significance of the area around here and the plots that they had, their names are on all the plots. The Fultons, the Wheelers, they all came from the old country, from Germany. So I assume that many of these people that are buried in here knew one another, and perhaps they're still calling their friends even after death. There have been reports within the cemetery, down this main trail, as you walk into the cemetery, what appears to be a woman, sometimes dressed in a white gown or a wedding gown or a bridal gown of some kind, holding a baby in her arms. We know that through historical records, it belongs to D.W. Rogers. There was one recording which I had heard a number of years ago. Somebody had recorded not too far, 5 or 10 feet away from this main gate here, a sound of somebody calling Minna, Minna, sort of wailing in the wind. And there is a gravesite in here with that name, that first name of Minna. The dead don't rest too easily out here at Bachelor's Grove because of all the sacrifice and the things that have went on here in the past. It acts as like a battery, charging up this area to a point that eventually it discharges in a way through manifestations, through spirits, through cold spots, feelings, sightings, and balls of light that people have seen.
Bachelor's Grove isn't the only haunted place in the city. Next, we went to Chicago's South Side to hear the tale of a murder and a ghost.
This is the roadway located directly in front of the Willowbrook Ballroom, where in 1931, Resurrection Mary, or a girl named Mary, was later dubbed Resurrection Mary, was hitchhiking back home along this roadway when she was struck and killed by a hit-and-run automobile somewhere between the Willowbrook Ballroom and Resurrection Cemetery. And since 1931, she has been seen still trying to hitchhike back home from the Willowbrook to the cemetery and beyond, but she never gets beyond the cemetery.
We're at Resurrection Cemetery in South Suburban Justice, 7600 Archer Avenue. We're coming up to the main gates of the cemetery, where in August of 1976, a man traveling by the cemetery saw what appeared to be a girl locked in the cemetery after hours. When the police were dispatched to the area, they found these two bars of the cemetery gates pulled apart and bent at a very funny angle. And pressed in the bars were the impressions of fingerprints, skin texture, and scorch marks.
No one was able to give an explanation how those marks were made on the bars. Then we visited the Mount Carmel Cemetery to see the evidence of yet another haunting.
We're coming up to a very interesting grave here in this cemetery. It's called Julia Bacola Petta. Julia died in 1921 at the age of 29 of complications from childbirth, and she was buried here with her stillborn infant in this grave here at Mount Carmel Cemetery. Soon after this, her mother, Philomena Bacola, began to have a series of unexplained dreams when Julia began pleading and begging with her mother to dig up and exhume the grave. And this went on for many years as the frantic mother tried to get permission from the local parish, the cemetery, and other police authorities to exhume the grave. They found Julia lying as fresh as the day she was buried, apparently no decomposition of the body whatsoever. There are 2 porcelain photographs on the monument now. The top one shows Julia on her wedding day holding a bouquet of roses. The bottom picture on the base of the monument shows Julia as she was found 6 years later after being dug up in a perfect state of preservation.
There isn't a reason why Julia had no signs of decomposition after 6 years. To this day, a white ghostly figure is seen roaming near her grave. Now we go to a restaurant in downtown Chicago where the Ghost Research Society found unmistakable photographic evidence of ghosts.
The first photograph shows absolutely nothing at all. The bottom photograph, taken a few seconds later after the film was wound and recocked, shows some strange light formation to the left of the bust. What appears in this photograph, if you look to the extreme left, near that table, it appears to be a semi-transparent figure of a monk-like individual, apparently cowled in a monk's habit. You can see the semi-transparent image above the table, and directly below the table, underneath the tablecloth, you can see what appears to be semi-transparent feet and legs.
This videotape was recorded by the Ghost Research Society at the stakeout of the restaurant. Listen closely. Personal accounts, recordings, and photographs. What do you think? Are the ghosts of Chicago real or unreal?
When we gaze up into the night sky, the brilliance of a billion twinkling lights fascinates us. How was the universe created? Was it created by a fiery explosion, or was it carefully planned? People have been fascinated from time immemorial about the universe and our place in it. From a child to an adult, we have read books about space exploration, listened to space adventures on radio, and tried space travel at amusement parks. But the lure for answers to the questions of the universe go far beyond what science, physics, and even theology can tell us. At Lawrence Berkeley Laboratories in Berkeley, California, cosmologist George Smoot heads a team of researchers that discovered the origins of the universe. While he found the answer to one of life's greatest mysteries, his research also raises an even greater question.
Well, cosmology is the study of the universe, how it was created, how it evolves, what its future might be. It's the study of the universe as a whole system. It's not just that we want to see how the stars and galaxies came into being. We really like to know, where did the whole universe come from? In this century, our ideas of the universe have changed dramatically. The universe has gotten to be at least 10,000 times bigger than it was.
In the 1920s, the astronomer Edwin Hubble proved the universe was expanding. While some scientists believed the expanding universe was a result of an explosion or Big Bang, others stuck with the idea that the universe was not moving, that it existed in a steady state. Hubble's discovery led Dr. Smoot to search for evidence of the Big Bang.
At the beginning of the universe, there must have been these seeds that were going to turn into stars or turn into galaxies or clusters of galaxies or bigger scale things. And the idea was we needed to go and look for those, make sure we understood it, and see how the universe grew and evolved as it was expanding.
Cosmic seeds are actual ripples in space-time, which Smoot thinks came from the formation of the universe.
The Big Bang is actually two bangs, the kind of expanding state that we live in now, plus this early time, which was accelerating and creating the space and time that we now live in.
If we could only see how the universe evolved, we would see the formation of the stars and galaxies, all the structures in space. At first, it would be a hot, fiery explosion with matter flying apart, then a cooling down where gravity would pull matter closer together into a spiral-like galaxy. The evidence for this dramatic movement are wrinkles in the fabric of time that hold the seeds from which the universe is born.
And so one of the things that I and other people did was to design a satellite, which we call the Cosmic Background Explorer, COBE for short, which was designed to go out and map the early universe and try and look for these seeds, and also try and look for the intermediate steps, what we could see about how the galaxies were forming, what was evolving.
The COBE satellite was launched by Delta rocket in 1992. Once it was in orbit, 500 miles above the Earth, it began spinning and opened its instruments to gather information. By mapping the level of radiation in the galaxy, COBE came up with a picture that revealed how the universe evolved from a smooth to a lumpy one made up of galaxies, clusters of galaxies, and even larger structures with holes in between.
The Cosmic Background Explorer satellite was NASA's first cosmology mission, and the idea was we had to get up into space to get away from the variable atmosphere and from man-made emissions and get into a place where the environment's very controlled, where we could scan out the whole sky. Our goal was to go and check, was that radiation really coming from the Big Bang? And that means we had to measure its spectrum, sort of split it into rainbow colors like the sun, and see if the shape looked right. And so one of the first experiments on the satellite measured that and showed, to better than a part in 1,000, it had exactly the shape predicted by the Big Bang.
Wrinkles are a picture of the universe as an embryo. They hold the seeds that will grow into other stars, galaxies, and clusters. They are the evidence of the birth of the universe. They designed experiments to take snapshots of what the universe looked like from an embryo through adolescence into middle age, the time period that we exist in now. Looking into the night sky, we can't believe we are the only intelligent life. In fact, it's extremely likely other life forms exist in different parts of the universe.
One of the things that we've done as astronomers and gone out and looked, we look at our own galaxy and we estimate there's about 100 billion stars in our galaxy. And that when you look at the picture we've made of our own galaxy, it's very clear it's a spiral disk, and that we're way out at the edge. I mean, we're just not an unusual star. So we're on the third rock from the sun, and we're on a star that if you were sitting in the center of the galaxy, you wouldn't be able to pick out of the crowd because it's way out in the boonies. If we use our telescopes and look carefully out at the night sky, everywhere we see a star, in the background we see another galaxy. And we estimate that if we were to have the time and the effort, we would see over 100 billion galaxies if we just went around a telescope and looked. And so that's 100 billion stars times 100 billion galaxies, and that's just in the part of the universe we can see.
The real question is what's going to happen to the universe as a whole.
Is the universe going to keep slowing down, but not enough to turn around and come back, or will it slow down, come back around and crash together? And in our studies, what we're seeing is it's too close to tell. It looks as though we're right on the edge, we're right on the borderline between a universe that will expand forever and a universe that will turn around and collapse. Our future is secure for a long time. And we don't know the answer, but we know the sun will run out of fuel first.
Terrifying tales of a brutal murderer and cannibal still haunt the small town of Rawlins, Wyoming. Can a prisoner's cruel past condemn him to his cell for all eternity? Our story starts here at the Wyoming Frontier Prison, formerly the state penitentiary. The prison closed in 1981, but some believe the spirits of a few inmates still remain behind the prison walls. Some of the worst murderers in the history of Wyoming spent their last days in the death house before their execution.
This is the death house, and I think this place in history sounds a lot different feels a lot different than any place else in the prison. The one that really scares me is the guy on the back side. This cell belonged to, I think, the worst murder in the history of Wyoming. When we do night tours, his candle always burns brighter or dimmer than any of the others. I don't know, I feel a little uncomfortable talking about him.
There's many times the hair on your back will stand up. You're fully aware that something is there, what you don't know. Pixley is tremendously scary. Even when you're doing tours and you're talking about him, as a tour guide, you always get a sense that this is maybe something you shouldn't be talking about. You'll get the creeps and the willies. And the candles will flicker. His will be straight. The other candles on the night tours will flicker. Definitely, there's definitely something to his story, I'm sure.
The last execution, Andrew Pixley in 1965, he was the youngest guy executed here. He was 22 years old. And when he was executed, they wanted to make sure that there was no leaks in the gas chamber. Usually they go by a pig, but this time they went out onto the streets of Rollins and they found a stray black cat, and they executed it. Black cat supposedly haunts the penitentiary. I was running out of A block one night after I came out of the cell, and I was running around and this black cat darted out in front of me. And he went around the corner, and another tour guide, Molly, was waiting for me there, and it darted out in front of her, and it just disappeared. And every once in a while we see him, but he's lurking around every night tour.
The one that scares me is the guy who was in the middle cell, Andrew Pixley. He was 21 years old when he committed the most horrible murder in the history of Wyoming. Family from Chicago on a ski vacation, Jackson Hole. He murdered 2 little girls. There was evidence of cannibalism. The beatings were so horrible. There are elements of Pixley's case that, in my opinion, are almost worse than Jeffrey Dahmer. He had the least witnesses. He had the most ministers. He was praying right at the time of his execution. He was baptized just for his execution.
Andrew Pixley was described as the perfect psychopath. He had no conscience at all. He didn't remember any of the heinous crimes committed when they found him in the room covered with blood. His execution was carried out shortly after midnight, December the 10th, 1965, in the prison gas chamber. Andrew Pixley took longer to die than any other man in the death house.
He lived twice as long as all the others in the gas chamber. They say it takes longer to kill evil, and I'm convinced this guy was pure evil. And I mean, I'm not a big proponent of capital punishment, but this Pixley character, he scares me to death because the crime was so horrible. Is the prison gas chamber. Mechanics of the gas chamber. The warden pulled a pin on the side, dropped this handle. A bag full of cyanide pellets rolled into acid below the chair. Prisoner was unconscious in 10 to 15 seconds. They were all dead within 3 minutes, except for Andrew Pixley. The witnesses were in the back room. For the first execution, there were 47 people in this room. By the time Andrew Pixley was executed in 1965, there were 13 people. They changed the seals around the windows before the execution. And then, as I said before, they test the gas chamber to make sure it's working all right. We don't give tours in December. I'd been sitting in my office. I'd been researching the executions. We were doing a new display on the executions. I had a head full of stories of executions, but I didn't have all the dates. And I came up here, it was getting kind of late, and I needed a flashlight to read the dates of the walls in the hanging room. I was writing to the dates and with my flashlight in hand, and my flashlight drifted over and I caught the black eyes of Andrew Pixley. As I looked deep into his eyes for the first time, I thought, there's something different about this guy. I'd never thought about it before. Something evil, possessed, demonic. At the instant I thought that, I swear to you, I heard something. I didn't recognize it at first, but behind me, I heard the faint sound of crying. Not just crying, young girls crying. And the sound of the crying was coming from the gas chamber. I was scared to death. Fumbling with my keys, I turned around and I'm walking to get out of here as fast as I can. When I got outside, and I thought about this, I mean, why just at that moment did I hear the crying? And why did I hear it then? And then I heard the church bells ringing a few blocks over, the Catholic Church. And the first thing I thought was Andrew Pixley had renounced the Catholic faith shortly before his death. And then I realized it was December 10th, 1965. His execution was just a few minutes after midnight that day.
Andrew Pixley's sentence was death, but his soul is the grim reminder that not all is at peace. The search for unidentified flying objects is one of the most popular pursuits of our time. There are more reports of UFO activity today than ever before. Are we alone in the universe? Have other beings visited our Earth? And has the government hidden the truth from us? The interest in the subject keeps growing.
We went to Bob Brown's 4th Annual International UFO Congress. One of the questions asked was, is the government covering up what they know about ETs and UFOs?
The governments have got their ways of keeping their secrets, as many secrets they've been keeping for years and years and years, which the public probably will never ever find about. They've got their ways of suppressing people, but I think the biggest thing they ever did was create the aura of ridicule around the subject. It was a wonderfully orchestrated thing where people who lived in worked in responsible positions and this kind of thing, because of the ridicule syndrome that went with this thing, they were in imminent danger of being branded lunatics and losing their positions. Anybody who talked about the subject was branded an idiot. But of course that only went for so long, and after many, many more people started to have encounters and experiences, sooner or later this thing was going to surface, and that's precisely what it's doing at this moment in time.
I was fortunate a number of years ago to have a cosmic top-secret clearance when I was at Shape NATO. That clearance allowed me access to the Shape NATO study that they did from 1961 to 1964. And at the completion of that 3-year study, they concluded that we were not alone, we'd probably never been alone, that we were being visited, surveyed, studied, or some program of some kind was underway by several, and I want to repeat, several high-technology extraterrestrial civilizations. The impact of that alone on me was kind of earth-shaking. They determined as a result of their 3-year study that there did not appear to be a military threat involved, which was basically the primary purpose of the study itself in the first place.
Daniel Sheehan is the well-respected lawyer who broke the Karen Silkwood case and exposed the Iran-Contra scandal to Congress. He told us that President Carter asked Marcia Smith, head of the Science and Technology Division of the U.S. Congress Research Office, to find out about UFOs.
She began to prepare the data, was given access to both unclassified and some classified data to prepare her report. And it was on the basis of this analysis that she did and supervised out of the Congressional Research Office that she came to the official conclusion that there was from 1 to 2 other intelligent, highly developed civilizations within our galaxy, other than our planet. Now, that was a fairly extraordinary finding, but it exists on the record as an official finding of the Congressional Research Office, and it was communicated to the Congress and then to the President. At that point, nothing more was done to release the information officially to the American public.
But the public's not buying. Jose Escamilla shoots video of UFOs 10 hours a day, every day. He sees them at Midway, a small community close to Roswell, New Mexico.
We recently captured a V formation of about 32 huge, 50-foot in diameter dome objects that are flying in formation. And beyond a doubt, they're not geese. There's nothing that suggests a neck or wing flutter. We have 800 hours of daytime footage of UFOs, anywhere from 1 to 100 per day. And for that to happen so blatantly and in broad daylight, I think that's definitely something behind it. What I consider to be profound is when you see something in the sky that is of extraordinary proportions and is sitting there, and it's circular, and it's just sitting there. You think it's a balloon, but then you look at it and it starts gliding, you know? And then you see other things just flashing by at extreme speeds. And you're saying, are my eyes playing with me, or do I get sky blind, or what is that? And this thing just moves and glides effortlessly. And then when you go back and see it on tape and you go freeze frame and you see hundreds of other objects around that you didn't see with the naked eye, that's very profound to me.
Ghosts have been defined as manifestations of persistent personal energy. They may haunt places they enjoyed while alive, or the place where they met their death, especially if that death was violent. Let's take a look at an interesting case in Los Angeles.
The Hollywood sign is one of the most readily identifiable landmarks in all of show business, but it's also the site of tragedy, mystery, and haunted intrigue. Peg Entwistle was a promising young actress in the 1930s who came to Hollywood, as did so many of her peers, with stars in her eyes. Her dazzling success as a teenager in Boston led her inevitably out west to the land that glitters. But despite bit parts in such films as 13 Weeks with Myrna Loy, Peg Entwistle's career never fully blossomed. On September the 18th, 1932, distraught, she climbed the steep slopes of Mount Lee to the great Hollywood Land sign, named after Mack Sennett's ill-fated real estate venture. She found a ladder left by a workman and climbed to the top of the 50-foot high letter H. She must have stood there overlooking Hollywood and the studios for what seemed like eternity, and then leapt to her death. There are those who claim her tormented soul still haunts the Hollywood hills to this very day. Even in death, she couldn't find peace.
I knew him as a young man, Nicky Hilton. I was with him on his honeymoon to Liz Taylor, and he was about the strangest, weirdest kid I'd ever met. The Jimmy Dean of millionaires, you know? The people tell us Hilton committed suicide here. And then I kind of peeked in that library when she mentioned it, and I walked down by myself, away from the crowd, the buffet, and the movie, whatever was going on, and I peeked in, and my God, there he was sitting at the desk. I mean, it's you know, made your hair stand on end. I kind of bolted out, you know. I can't explain why later on I thought I saw Groucho Marx there. Maybe it was my week for stars, I don't know. But it was his vision or apparition, his look, you know, that look he had. He looked just like Jimmy Dean.
Sometime later, we had been invited over to the house, and our hostess had taken me upstairs and shown me the bedroom. The carpeting was stained with blood.
It was the same room where Nicky Hilton years before had slashed his wrists. And the strange thing was, no matter how many times the carpeting had been replaced, the bloodstains kept coming back. While we were examining the carpet, our hostess's daughter called to the room on the intercom. Something really strange was happening in the kitchen. Well, we rushed down there wondering what could be causing such a fright. And something was definitely shaking the liquor cabinet. I mean, from the inside, we thought maybe a cat had gotten in there, but after our hostess unlocked it, all the shaking stopped and there was nothing unusual at all about it.
She then closed the bar and locked it, and everything went crazy. Liquid came pouring out, bottles were shaking. I was scared to death. He and I looked at each other. We were both panic-stricken.
Oh, it's frightening, especially the noise and rattling and shaking. A bottle, you know, actually hearing something. And you think maybe it's a tremor, an earthquake, or what, or some kind of a gag, or, you know, like right on cue, things would happen constantly in that house.
Close encounters of the fifth kind is a subject more people are talking about. But not everyone believes stories of contact or abduction by extraterrestrials. Are they made up, or are some people really communicating with beings from another dimension? Not shaken by such experiences, two men have turned theirs into careers.
Artists from different eras have depicted images from people to impressions to dreamlike visions. Modern-day artists are filling a void in the art world. They're creating what extraterrestrials look like. While some use their imagination, others apply their talents to record what they see. Carlos Macias from Mount Washington, a suburb of Los Angeles, paints beings he's met on the planet Zakar.
Tell us exactly what sort of paintings you do.
Basically, I paint extraterrestrial. Those are figurative paintings. I paint energies, energies and that are conveyed to me in the form of the shapes that I paint.
When did you first start having these visionary experiences? How long ago?
My first experience was in 1972. I was in Nicaragua during the earthquake, and I started to see all kind of flying saucers around Managua, and I started to get more intrigued by it. And as I did more and more, I started to feel messages, extraterrestrial messages.
When you experience these things, how do you know what happens?
Well, I start feeling those telepathic energies, I start to feel the radiation.
Carlos's paintings blend movement with shapes that seem to vibrate on the canvas. He aims to create visual music, a new language.
This is a musician in soccer, as you can see, he's transforming sound waves into radiation. People from soccer probably come from the same fire than we did, from the same energy, creative energy than we did. And obviously they're trying to help this world, to continue to exist. I only had good experience in Sakar. I never had nothing but a run happen to me.
While Carlos took journeys to another planet, almost like a sightseer, another artist, Steve Neal, experienced a more dramatic phenomenon, abduction. Since he was a child, he remembers beings testing him and believes his profession was brought about by a lifetime of extraterrestrial encounters.
You've got quite a collection here. Tell me a little bit about what you do for a living.
What I do for a living is I make aliens and monsters and props and stuff for science fiction movies. I feel that this experience with this other intelligences has definitely influenced my interest in things like Star Trek and astronomy and science fiction greatly. I had a connection with the sky, with the stars. It was the thing that I felt most comfortable with was aviation, the stars primarily. When I was a little kid, I didn't even feel right about my physical form. That felt odd to me, and my surroundings felt odd, and my parents didn't seem like my parents to me. And these are very, very crazy things. A lot of times, how it works is that you'll remember a dream. Now, I remember dreams going all the way back into childhood, just like they happened yesterday, because they were so traumatic and they were so vivid that I now believe that they were actual conscious memories, and that's why I remember them so well.
Why do you think you were abducted?
Well, that's always a difficult question to answer. My answer is very, very crazy, as well as a lot of other people feel that somehow we're connected to this experience beyond just being taken casually from our bedrooms or our cars to see, gee, what a human being is like. In actuality, that somehow we're part of their culture and that we're here in this form to basically influence the culture from within the inside and to watch it.
Do you feel you belong more with them than you do with us?
I have to admit that I do, actually, yeah. They tell me that when this is done, whatever it is I'm doing down here, whatever it is we're all doing down here, all the millions of people who claim this, is that we get to go home after this.
What do these beings look like?
Well, they're quite classic as far as a classic description is concerned. They're large-headed, black-eyed, very much kind of like the Close Encounters type image.
Are they all similar? Are there different races?
They seem to be similar within the black-eyed ones, which some people refer to as grays. I don't, but for that type, there's a large one, usually about 5 foot tall. That one has the most intimate dealings with the person involved, with the individual who's having this experience. The smaller ones, which resemble the larger one, were about 3.5 foot to 4 foot, and they generally seem to be more like drones. The other type that are seen are sort of a Eurasian type, which are very human looking, and then there's another type which I've only been privy to a couple of times, one time real clearly, and that was the famous reptile type being. As in the film 2001, they have been here since the very beginning, influencing our evolution. In fact, they have gone as far as to say, like in 2001, before that they actually created the life on this world, that they seeded this world.
Hauntings and apparitions are reported throughout the world and seem to be connected to people with high emotional energy. One of the hot spots for emotional energies would have to be Hollywood. Just ask anyone in the entertainment business. Let's see what we can find here. The Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel used to be the gathering place for stars during Hollywood's golden era. The hotel is rich with the spirit of Hollywood. But do Hollywood spirits still visit? During the making of the movie From Here to Eternity, Montgomery Clift lived on the 9th floor of the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. He stayed for over 3 months. After shooting each day, he would return to the hotel and spend hours rehearsing his lines and playing the bugle, which he had to learn for the movie. Since his death, guests and employees of the hotel have reported many times that late at night, they hear the sound of a bugle playing in the hallway near room 928, Montgomery Clift's room. Terrell Valazza was hired as a cocktail waitress, but also helped with the renovation of the hotel before its grand reopening in 1986.
First week here, it was good. The beginning of the second week is when I was getting off the 9th floor elevator and I was walking down the hall and I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around to see if there was anybody following me and there was nobody there. And then as I was continuing to walk, I felt a cold breeze like walk right by me. And I went down in the elevator and never went back up.
What was it that brushed past Terrell Valazza in the hallway? Could it still be Montgomery Clift playing his bugle after all these years? Ghost experts believe sightings such as these are examples of spirits returning to places where they enjoyed happy times in life. Actor Clifton Webb, who was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, lived here with his mother, Mabel. He was very superstitious, and when she died, he locked all her clothes away and never entered the room. He believed her ghost still lived there. Clifton is no longer with us either. Or is he? New tenants claim chairs move by themselves, cigarettes break, and their cats disappear. Oh, by the way, Clifton Webb hated cats and cigarettes. This is Runyon Canyon, an overgrown wilderness located in the heart of Hollywood. In 1983, the city of Los Angeles purchased the canyon and established a park on the site of a former estate known as the Pines. The magnificent estate in Runyon Canyon was first built by singing star John McCormick in the 30s and later bought by AMP heir Huntington Hartford. But the place was abandoned in the 60s and the lavishly landscaped grounds left for ruin. What was once the site of wild Hollywood parties, frequented by such stars as Errol Flynn, eventually crumbled and decayed. All that's left now is a virtual ghost estate. Residents say they hear sounds of a party and have seen strange multicolored lights coming from the second story of where the main house once stood. But the bizarre sightings go even further. Neighborhood resident Tracy Vivot is a waitress during the day and one of several who have witnessed unusual phenomena.
I just lived down the street from the park, so I used to come up here jogging after work. And one day I came after work. It was a little later than I usually come. So I started jogging up the hill. And all of a sudden, I felt this cool, cold air brush past me. It was a little unnerving, and especially, I mean, it was the middle of the summertime. It was July, so I turned around, and I jogged back down the hill. And I started just doing some easy stretching. And I was bending over, and I caught something on the corner of my eye. And he turned, and I saw this figure, this man, and he was on this bottom of these stairs, and he looked at me, and I froze. And he turned around, and he walked up the stairs, and he just walked right off into nowhere. I mean, he vanished, and after he left, I went over to the stairs, and the stairs just end. So if it was like a real person, they would have had to jump down or something, but this ghost, or I don't know what it was, it just sort of went right out into nowhere. I left, and I don't come here anymore.